Every day, you make thousands of decisions. You choose what to wear. You choose what to eat. You choose who to love. You choose what to believe. At least that's what you've been told. But what if every choice you have ever made was already determined by forces you neither created nor control? What if the feeling of choice is real, but the freedom behind that choice is not? Think carefully. Before you answer, ask yourself a simple question. Did you choose the country where you were born? Did you choose your parents? Did you choose your genes? Did you choose your first language? Did you choose the religion you were exposed to as a child? Did you choose the economic conditions that shaped your ambitions? Did you choose the fears that keep you awake at night? Or were these things imposed upon you long before you became aware of yourself? Most people never question this. They wake up, go to work, defend their opinions, vote for politicians, argue with strangers, fall in love, get angry, build an entire identity around a story they never wrote. Then they call it freedom. But if your beliefs were installed by culture, if your values were shaped by environment, if your personality emerged from experiences you never chose, then where exactly does free will enter the equation? This is not a religious question. It is not a political question. It is an engineering question. Because every human being is a biological organism interacting with an environment. And whenever you understand the inputs, you can often predict the outputs. A seed placed in fertile soil grows differently than one placed in a desert. The outcome changes because the conditions change. Yet somehow, when discussing human beings, we pretend the same principles no longer apply. We invent mysterious concepts. We talk about souls. We talk about destiny. We talk about personal responsibility as though people emerged from nowhere, independent of the world around them. But the evidence points elsewhere. Every year, neuroscience uncovers more about how decisions are formed before conscious awareness appears. Psychology reveals how strongly environment influences behavior. Sociology demonstrates the power of culture. Biology exposes the role of genetics. And together they tell a disturbing story. The person you call you may be far less independent than you imagine. That idea terrifies people, because if free will is not what we think it is, then our entire civilization may be built on a misunderstanding of human behavior. Laws, punishments, education, politics, economics, all of them assume that individuals are freely choosing their actions. But what if they aren't? What if we have been blaming people for outcomes produced by conditions? What if we have been treating symptoms while ignoring causes? And what if understanding this changes everything? Not only how we see others, but how we see ourselves. The most dangerous illusion is not the illusion that someone controls you. The most dangerous illusion is believing that you are completely self-created. Because once you believe that, you stop asking the most important question. Why do I think the way I do? Tonight, we're going to ask that question. And by the end of this video, you may never look at your own decisions the same way again. If you tell people they are not completely free, many become defensive. Not because they have carefully examined the evidence, but because the idea threatens their identity. Most people do not simply believe in free will. They build their entire sense of self around it. They believe they are the sole authors of their thoughts, the sole creators of their ambitions, the sole architects of their success and failure. But before we defend free will, we should first define it. What exactly are we talking about? When someone says, "I freely chose this," what does that actually mean? It means they could have chosen differently under the exact same conditions. The same brain, the same memories, the same environment, the same information, the same biological state, and yet somehow produce a different outcome. But where would that different outcome come from? Think carefully. Every decision you make emerges from something: a preference, a memory, an emotion, a fear, a desire, a habit, a learned association. None of these appear from nowhere. They are products of previous experiences interacting with your biology. Imagine a child growing up in a violent neighborhood. Every day, they witness aggression. Every day, they learn that power comes from intimidation. Every day, they see fear being rewarded. By adulthood, that individual may become aggressive. Society often says they chose that path. But did they choose the conditions that created those behavioral patterns? Did they choose the environment that shaped their nervous system? Did they choose the experiences that taught them how to respond? Or are we confusing outcomes with causes? This confusion exists everywhere. Consider a dog. If a dog is repeatedly beaten by its owner, eventually it may become fearful or aggressive. Nobody calls that free will. We immediately recognize environmental conditioning. We understand that behavior emerged from experience. Now replace the dog with a human being. Suddenly, many people abandon the same logic. They begin speaking as though humans operate outside the laws of cause and effect. Why? Because humans tell stories about themselves. Stories are powerful, but stories are not explanations. The feeling that you made a choice does not explain how the choice was generated. It only describes what the experience feels like from the inside. Let us perform a simple thought experiment. Choose your favorite food. Why is it your favorite? Did you consciously design your taste preferences? Did you engineer the structure of your brain? Did you select the experiences that created positive associations with certain flavors? Of course not. Your preferences emerged through interaction with your environment. The same is true for music. The same is true for political beliefs. The same is true for religion. The same is true for personal identity. Most people imagine themselves as captains steering a ship. In reality, they may be more like passengers discovering where the ship has already been headed. Modern neuroscience adds another uncomfortable layer to this discussion. Experiments have repeatedly shown that measurable brain activity associated with decisions can occur before people become consciously aware of making those decisions. The brain appears to begin processes before conscious awareness catches up. This does not mean consciousness is meaningless, but it does challenge the simplistic notion that a separate inner self sits outside biology, independently commanding the system. Perhaps consciousness is not the commander. Perhaps it is part of the process itself. Consider how often your thoughts simply appear. Right now, try choosing your next thought, not expressing it, not reacting to it, creating it. Where does it come from? Most people discover something strange. Thoughts arrive, they emerge, they present themselves. Then consciousness observes them. We often claim ownership over processes we barely understand. This is not an attack on humanity. It is an invitation to become more accurate, because accuracy matters. If we misunderstand human behavior, we will build ineffective systems. We will create punishments where solutions are needed. We will create blame where understanding is required. We will continue fighting symptoms while ignoring causes. The idea of human nature suffers from the same problem. People often say, humans are naturally greedy. But what does that mean? If greed is natural, why do some societies display more cooperation than others? Why do people behave differently under different economic conditions? Why does behavior change when environments change? A snake behaves like a snake because of its biological structure and environmental interactions. A mouse behaves like a mouse because of its biological structure and environmental interactions. Humans are no different. We are not exempt from nature. We are express If human behavior is shaped by conditions, then we must confront an uncomfortable possibility. Our institutions may be built upon a false assumption. The assumption is simple. People freely choose who they become. And because they freely choose, society believes they deserve either reward or punishment. This belief is so deeply embedded into modern civilization that most people never question it. Courts assume it. Schools assume it. Politicians assume it. Economists assume it. Entire legal systems are built around it. But what if the assumption is wrong? Imagine a bridge collapsing. Engineers do not gather around the wreckage and say, "The bridge should have tried harder." They investigate materials, design flaws, environmental conditions, structural weaknesses. They search for causes. Yet when human beings fail, society often abandons this logic entirely. A child grows up surrounded by violence. Society waits 20 years, then asks why violence emerged. A community experiences poverty for generations. Society waits decades, then wonders why crime appears. The population is subjected to misinformation. Society acts surprised when irrational beliefs spread. We repeatedly create conditions, then act shocked by the outcomes. This is not intelligence. This is poor systems design. Consider prisons. Around the world, billions of dollars are spent locking people into concrete boxes. The assumption is that punishment creates better behavior. Yet many prisons function as schools for criminality. Individuals enter damaged. They leave more damaged. Society focuses on punishment because punishment feels emotionally satisfying. But reality does not care about emotional satisfaction. Reality responds to causes. If crime has causes, then removing causes will always be more effective than punishing symptoms. Imagine trying to stop a disease by attacking patients instead of treating the infection. That would seem absurd. Yet we often approach social problems in exactly that way. We punish, we condemn, we blame, but we rarely redesign the conditions that generate the behavior. The same pattern appears in education. Modern education systems were largely designed during the industrial age. Their purpose was not to maximize creativity. Their purpose was to produce predictable workers. Sit down, stay quiet, follow instructions, repeat information, obey authority. These behaviors are rewarded. Then society asks why innovation is rare. Once again, the outcome reflects the environment. We do not design people for curiosity. Then we complain about conformity. The same pattern appears in politics. Every election cycle, citizens are encouraged to believe that replacing one group of leaders with another will solve systemic problems. But political systems often treat symptoms rather than causes. One politician blames another. One party blames another. One nation blames another. Meanwhile, the underlying conditions remain unchanged. Poverty remains. Resource scarcity remains. Economic insecurity remains. Environmental destruction remains. The arguments change. The outcomes do not. Why? Because politicians are not typically trained as systems engineers. They are trained to win elections. Those are very different skills. If your aircraft fails, you do not hold a popularity contest. If a hospital is collapsing, you do not ask celebrities how to redesign it. Yet when managing society itself, we routinely place enormous trust in people whose expertise often lies in persuasion rather than problem solving. Consider traffic congestion. Every day, millions of people waste countless hours sitting in traffic. Politicians debate, committees debate, citizens complain. Yet the problem often persists for decades. Why? Because transportation is a technical problem. It requires technical solutions, data, engineering, systems optimization, not ideology, not slogans, not emotional arguments. The same principle applies to energy, food production, housing, healthcare, resource management. These are engineering problems, yet we continue attempting to solve them through political competition and economic rivalry. Imagine two doctors competing for profit while patients die waiting for treatment. Imagine two engineers competing while a dam is collapsing. Suddenly, the absurdity becomes obvious. Human survival should not depend upon competition between institutions seeking advantage. It should depend upon finding the most effective solutions available. This is why many of society's problems appear permanent. We are using outdated tools to solve modern challenges. Political systems evolved in a world without artificial intelligence, without advanced automation, without global data networks, without real-time resource analysis. Yet, we continue treating these systems as though they represent the highest form of intelligence. They do not. They are historical artifacts. Civilization has changed. Technology has changed. Human knowledge has changed. But many of our institutions remain trapped in assumptions inherited from centuries ago. We have powerful machines. We have extraordinary scientific knowledge. We have global communication. Yet, millions still suffer from problems that are technically solvable. Not because solutions do not exist, but because our systems are not designed to apply them effectively. The failure is not human nature. The failure is design. And until we understand that, we will continue blaming individuals for outcomes produced by systems. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is not that free will may be limited. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is that we have misunderstood ourselves. For thousands of years, human beings have always searched for explanations. We wanted to know why people succeed, why people fail, why some become violent, why others become compassionate, why some build civilizations, and why others destroy them. For most of history, we explained these differences through stories. We spoke about character, virtue, sin, good people, bad people, strong people, weak people. But stories are not the same as understanding. A story can be comforting. A story can be emotionally satisfying. A story can make us feel certain. But reality does not care about certainty. Reality only responds to what is true. And the deeper we investigate human behavior, the more difficult it becomes to defend the idea that people are self-created beings operating independently from their environment. You did not create your nervous system. You did not create your genetics. You did not create your childhood. You did not create your culture. You did not create the language that formed your thoughts. You entered a world that already existed, a world that began shaping you from the moment you were born, and it is still shaping you now. Some people hear this and become uncomfortable because they believe it diminishes human dignity. But perhaps the opposite is true. Perhaps dignity begins when we stop pretending to know things we do not know. Perhaps dignity begins with intellectual honesty. The three most important words in science are not, "I was right." They are, "I don't know." I don't know is not weakness. It is not ignorance. It is not surrender. It is the beginning of discovery. The person who says, "I don't know," remains open to learning. The person who believes they already possess absolute truth has stopped learning. Throughout history, some of humanity's greatest mistakes began with certainty. Certainty that one race was superior. Certainty that one religion possessed absolute truth. Certainty that one political system had all the answers. Certainty that one group deserved power over another. Again and again, certainty produced suffering. Not because people were evil, but because they stopped questioning their assumptions. Perhaps the future requires a different attitude. Less certainty, more curiosity, less ideology, more investigation, less ego, more understanding. We often imagine ourselves as the center of the story, as though history has been leading toward us, as though our beliefs represent the final stage of human development. But what if we are still at the beginning? What if future generations look back at our civilization the same way we look back at medieval medicine? What if they see a society trapped by outdated assumptions? A society attempting to solve complex problems with primitive concepts? A society surrounded by abundance but organized around scarcity? A society possessing extraordinary technology but limited by ancient institutions? Perhaps they will wonder why we spent so much energy blaming people, why we argued endlessly about morality while ignoring conditions, why we punished symptoms while neglecting causes, why we treated social problems as personal failures instead of recognizing them as design failures. Perhaps one day it will seem obvious, just as it now seems obvious that disease is not caused by evil spirits. Perhaps future generations will understand that much of human behavior was never a mystery, only a system waiting to be understood. This does not mean individuals are irrelevant. It does not mean choices do not exist. It means choices emerge from conditions. And if we wish to create better choices, we must create better conditions. That is the responsibility of an intelligent civilization. Not to judge, not to condemn, not to search endlessly for villains, but to understand, to investigate, to redesign. The question is not whether free will exists. The question is whether we are willing to understand ourselves deeply enough to move beyond simplistic explanations, whether we are willing to replace assumptions with evidence, whether we are willing to replace ideology with inquiry, whether we are willing to replace blame with design. Because the future will not be created by people who claim to know everything. The future will be created by people willing to admit what they do not know. People willing to question everything, including themselves, including their culture, including their most cherished beliefs. And perhaps that is the true beginning of freedom. Not freedom from laws, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from illusion, the freedom to see ourselves as we truly are. Biological organisms, products of nature and nurture, mechanisms shaped by experience, yet capable of learning, capable of adapting, capable of creating entirely new environments. And perhaps, for the first time in human history, capable of consciously designing a civilization worthy of the intelligence that created it. Thank you for watching.